Ya, saya masuk.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Suara saya terdengar? Selamat sore, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Selamat datang kepada para peserta yang berkenan hadir pada kesempatan hari ini di acara virtual workshop WSO2. Setting the Foundation for Digital Transformation through API Management and Integration. Perkenalkan, saya Citra Sari yang akan jadi moderator selama acara virtual workshop ini berlangsung. Sebelum kita masuk ke sesi acara, akan ada pembukaan terlebih dahulu yang akan diberikan oleh Pak Arfi Fitranda, STMT, selaku Direktur Enterprise Business Solution PT Swamedia Informatika. Untuk Bapak Arfi, dipersilahkan.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Yang kami hormati dan banggakan para pembicara dan peserta virtual workshop yang hadir saat ini. Kami ucapkan selamat datang di workshop yang akan kita adakan secara virtual dengan tema Setting the Foundation for Digital Transformation through API Management and Integration. Event ini diadakan atas kerjasama kami, PT Swamedia Informatika dengan WSO2. Kami sampaikan terima kasih dan penghargaan yang setinggi-tingginya untuk semua pihak sehingga event ini terlaksana. Sedikit cerita kelas balik. PT Swamedia Informatika telah bekerja sama dengan WSO2 selama kurang lebih 2 tahun. Sejak 2018, kami ditunjuk oleh WSO2 sebagai Value Added Reseller Partner untuk Indonesia. Sebagai partner satu-satunya di Indonesia yang saat ini diberikan kepercayaan oleh WSO2 untuk mengembangkan market WSO2 dengan beberapa produk stacknya. Selain subscription, kami juga menyiapkan tim implementasi yang diperkuat oleh beberapa engineer dengan sertifikasi WSO2 Identity Server. Berbicara mengenai digital transformation, banyak referensi yang menjadi rujukan. Dan kebetulan saat ini menjadi hype karena hampir selalu ada diskusi mengenai digital transformation. Dalam pemahaman kami, ada dua latar belakang yang mendasari digital transformation. Yang pertama adalah dengan berkembangnya teknologi digital yang maju besar, melahirkan tantangan untuk mengubah bisnis model. bagaimana teknologi digital mendorong pelaku usaha untuk meraih peluang baru, membaca kondisi pasar, dan mengamati perubahan perilaku customer, dan bagaimana perusahaan melakukan perubahan atau transformasi internal untuk menuju arah bisnis yang baru. Sedangkan yang kedua, dengan teknologi digital saat ini menciptakan banyak sekali touch point atau channel yang bisa dipergunakan oleh customer. Saat ini kita mengenal omnichannel, chatbot, dan beberapa konsep atau teknologi yang dipakai oleh customer berkomunikasi dengan enterprise. Di sini tantangannya adalah bagaimana agar lingkungan bisnis dapat meningkatkan customer experience. Berbicara digital transformation adalah bagaimana bisnis melakukan pendekatan baru terhadap customer, melakukan engagement, melakukan enablement terhadap customer, sehingga customer mendapatkan experience yang baru dan berbeda. Kami percaya bahwa beberapa produk stack dari WSO2 mampu berperan sebagai enablement dalam melakukan digital transformation. Di WSO2, kami memiliki WSO2 API Manager, Enterprise Integration, IoT, Identity and Access Management, and Analytics. Mengapa API Manager berperan sebagai enabler untuk digital transformation, dan kenapa diperlukan Enterprise Integration, Analytics, dan produk stack lain untuk melakukan transformasi digital akan dibahas lebih lanjut pada sesi workshop berikutnya. Lebih detail dari WSO2 API Manager ini akan disampaikan narasumber kedua, yakni Randika dari WSO2. Dan satu lagi, saat ini kami memiliki portal untuk mempelajari lebih lanjut mengenai WSO2. Mengingat terbatasnya referensi mengenai WSO2 dalam bahasa Indonesia. Dan untuk menjembatani komunikasi developer, stakeholder, user WSO2 di Indonesia, saat ini kami mengelola portal belajar dengan alamat belajarwso2.com. Silakan apabila memerlukan referensi mengenai WSO2 dapat mengunjungi belajarwso2.com. Sekian sedikit dari kami. Selamat mengikuti workshop kali ini. Mudah-mudahan memberikan manfaat dan banyak insight baru yang diperoleh setelah mengikuti ini. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih kepada Pak Arfi Pitranda yang telah melakukan opening speech untuk acara virtual workshop WSO2 ini. Oke, kita lanjut ke sesi selanjutnya. Digital Business Strategy. Saat ini kebutuhan customer semakin kompleks, namun membutuhkan layanan transaksi dan akses servis yang mudah, murah, dan cepat. Selain itu, saat ini banyak perusahaan yang berevolusi juga ke digital business, dan dampaknya adalah kebutuhan layanan akan informasi dan integrasi layanan setiap perusahaan juga meningkat. Ditambah lagi banyak user menggunakan berbagai jenis layanan yang ditawarkan oleh perusahaan. Namun ketika jumlah user meningkat, diperlukan strategi baru agar layanan dapat diberikan dengan kualitas terbaik dan bagaimana Anda memiliki kontrol penuh atas akses ke layanan tersebut. Hal tersebut yang tadi sudah dijelaskan oleh Pak Arfi maupun dengan latar belakang digital business strategi ini dapat diatasi dengan produk middleware bernama WSO2 API Manager yang dapat bisa dilihat di sini purely open source full life scale API management solution. It can be deployed on-prem, on private cloud, hybrid fashion, managing, monitoring and monetizing APIs and API product. Hal ini nanti akan lebih lanjut akan dijelaskan oleh pembicara kami yaitu Mr. Randika dari tim WSO2. Sebelum kita masuk ke pembicara kami yaitu dari tim WSO2, akan ada pembicara pertama yaitu Bapak Ahmad Syahrudin. Beliau akan menjelaskan tentang open source. Bapak Ahmad Syarudin ini adalah sistem analis di PT Swamedia Informatika. Beliau akan membahas mengenai apa itu open source, bagaimana kelebihan dan kekurangannya, dan bagaimana perkembangannya hingga saat ini. Nanti sesi selanjutnya yaitu pembahasan tentang W1 API Manager yang dilakukan oleh Randika. Lalu akan ada Q&A di sesi terakhir dan akan ada door prize berupa saldo OVO atau GoPay. Jadi tetap menyimak rangkaian dari sesi acara virtual workshop W1 ini. Dipersilakan kepada Bapak Ahmad Syarudin untuk memulai presentasinya.
Baik, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Ibu Cita atas penonton, teman-teman sekalian. Pada kesempatan yang sangat mulia ini, saya akan membawakan materi tentang open source. Oke. Ketika kita bicara open source, maka yang ada di benak kita adalah bahwa itu adalah sesuatu yang gratis. Ya, open source itu adalah sesuatu yang gratis. Gratis dari sisi mana? Gratis dari sisi bagaimana kita mendapatkan source dari sebuah aplikasi itu. Kemudian karena kita sudah mendapatkan source itu, maka kita bebas untuk melakukan modifikasi terhadap source tersebut. Kemudian sekali modifikasi, kita pun bebas untuk melakukan distribusi aplikasi, sehingga tidak ada sesuatu yang perlu dibayar ketika kita melakukan modifikasi maupun distribusi dari aplikasi open source tersebut. Nah, apa sih sebetulnya kelebihan dari open source itu? Paling tidak, kami mendapatkan ada 6 item yang menjadi titik kuat open source. Yang pertama adalah bahwa source code-nya tersedia. Ya, kita bisa mendownloadnya dari sumber atau dari link yang tersedia di internet. Kemudian yang kedua adalah kita punya banyak pilihan, ya. Berbeda dengan yang closed source, hanya ada satu aplikasi, mau nggak mau kita pakai itu. Tapi kalau open source itu karena banyak pilihan ragamnya, dan kita bebas menentukan mana yang kita inginkan sebagai kebutuhan kita, maka pilihan pun menjadi lebih banyak. Kemudian yang ketiga, oleh karena open source itu sifatnya terbuka, maka tentu saja tidak ada pembajakan atau privacy di sini, karena memang sudah dibuka semuanya. Yang keempat adalah dari sisi kualitas improvement-nya. Open source itu kan source terbuka sehingga banyak developer yang mampu melakukan improvisasi dari kualitasnya. Ketika ada suatu fungsi yang belum optimal, maka sejumlah developer pun mampu melakukan optimasi terhadap fungsi tersebut. Dan ini sifatnya adalah sosial, sehingga kualitasnya pun akan terjamin lebih sempurna karena diakomodir oleh banyak developer. Begitupun untuk hal security-nya, karena banyak developer yang berkecimpung di situ, yang sukarela melakukan patching, tentunya security-nya pun menjadi lebih handal. Dan yang terakhir kelebihannya adalah cost saving, artinya tidak perlu banyak keluar uang ketika kita membutuhkan aplikasi di dalam sebuah project. Ya. Kemudian kita masuk dalam bahasan kekurangannya. Tentu saja samping kelebihan juga ada kekurangannya. Di antaranya adalah tidak ada garansi. Nah, ketika kita mendapatkan aplikasi open source yang bermasalah, kita nggak bisa mengklaim karena memang tidak ada yang bertanggung jawab di situ. Kemudian kita juga butuh sumber daya manusianya untuk memodifikasi atau modifikasi software yang ada, karena tidak semua orang mampu atau punya skill pemrograman yang handal dan mampu membaca coding orang lain, sehingga kita perlu SDM yang handal juga di sini. Kemudian yang ketiga kekurangannya adalah kita menjadi tergantung kepada developer yang berbaik hati untuk melakukan patching misalnya ketika ada bug, dan kita nggak bisa melakukan itu sendiri karena harus menunggu para developer yang baik hati untuk melakukan patching kemudian melakukan perbaikan di satu isi misalnya. Dan terakhir adalah tidak ada proteksi. Berikut adalah perkembangan atau contoh aplikasi dari OpenSearch, baik dari bidang browser, kemudian dari database juga ada, kemudian dari middleware-nya juga ada, kemudian dari web server, sampai ke aplikasi perkantoran. Nah, ini menandakan bahwa OpenSearch dari masa ke masa akan terus berkembang ya, sesuai dengan kebutuhan bisnis dunia dan juga teknologi yang semakin canggih yang digunakan oleh OpenSearch itu sendiri. OpenCore ini adalah sebuah model bisnis, yakni sebuah model bisnis yang memanfaatkan layanan atau fungsi-fungsi yang sudah ada sebetulnya di OpenSearch sehingga menghasilkan sebuah produk yang memiliki nilai jual. Jadi OpenCore ini adalah sebuah bisnis untuk kalau dalam istilah menduitkan OpenSearch. Karena kita tahu dari sebelumnya bahwa OpenSearch itu tidak ada uang di situ, tidak ada gratis lah ini. Nah, apa sih bedanya OpenCore dan OpenSearch? Di antaranya kelebihan OpenSearch-nya adalah OpenCore adalah pertama dia memiliki nilai lebih dia bandingkan dengan OpenSearch. Seperti misalnya ada fitur tambahannya, kemudian ada dukungan dari pengguna aplikasi tersebut, kemudian juga ada customisasi, kemudian garansinya juga dijamin, bahkan sampai ke patching atau update dari aplikasi tersebut. Ini yang ditawarkan oleh paling tidak oleh OpenCore yang kata-kata fitur ini ada di OpenSearch. Sebagai contoh, OpenCore adalah 3 aplikasi yang sudah umum ya. Di antaranya ada Redis Enterprise yang dibangun di bawah Redis, kemudian ada DataStax ya, database NoSQL yang dibangun di atas Cassandra sebagai open source-nya. Kemudian ada OpenCore yang bernama Confluence, ini layanan data streaming yang dibangun di atas Kafka. Jadi open source-nya itu di layar yang bawah, sementara OpenCore-nya itu di layar yang atas. Kalau kita membandingkan antara OpenSearch, OpenCore, dan OS2 subscription, OpenSearch di sini bisa juga kita sandingkan atau kita istilahkan dengan license. Kemudian OpenCore bisa juga kita istilahkan dengan license. Dari sisi supportnya, untuk yang OpenSearch itu cenderung dalam bentuknya komunitas yang terbangun ya, oleh masing-masing developer. Sementara di OpenCore, selain community, dia juga punya premium. Nah, kelebihan di WSO2 ini, supportnya adalah global support dan timing waktunya adalah full. Jadi ketika ada kesulitan, maka kapanpun, kemudian dimanapun, kita bisa mendapat dukungan dari WSO2 ini. Kemudian di sisi training dan certification-nya, di OS atau OpenSearch itu tidak ada, karena tidak ada penanggung jawabnya di situ. Sementara di OpenCore, dia memiliki layanan training ya untuk para penggunanya. Demikian juga halnya untuk yang WSO2 subscription. Kemudian dari partner network untuk yang OpenSearch dia dimiliki, sementara untuk yang OpenCore dan WSO2 dimiliki. Pada umumnya untuk yang OpenSearch itu fungsionalnya standar, tidak mengarah kepada bisnis enterprise. Sementara untuk yang OpenCore atau yang license kita bisa mendapatkan fitur tersebut dengan catatan misalnya berbayar. Ya. Sementara untuk yang WSO2 itu semua fiturnya bisa didapatkan langsung. Kemudian lifecycle masing tipe ini untuk yang license atau OpenCore dan WSO2 didukung. Untuk yang OpenSearch tidak didukung. Nah, inilah sekilas ya perbandingan antara OpenSearch, OpenCore, dan juga WS2 subscription. Jika kita lihat di sini tentu banyak kelebihan ya yang ditawarkan oleh WSO2 subscription. Baiklah, demikian pemaparan singkat dari saya terkait tentang OpenSearch dan OpenCore. Mudah-mudahan ada manfaatnya, dan selanjutnya saya kembalikan kepada Ibu Citra sebagai moderator. Terima kasih.
Baik, terima kasih. Terima kasih kepada Bapak Ahmad Syahruddin yang atas pembahasannya mengenai overview dari open source dan open core. Kita akan masuk ke sesi 2, yaitu pembahasan kemampuan W1 API Manager yang akan dibawakan oleh Randika yang merupakan Senior Solution Engineer dan salah satu anggota tim W1 Solution Architecture API. Sebelum bergabung dengan W1, Randika bekerja di Android Logic sebagai lead developer AS2 Gateway yang merupakan platform B2B messaging. Beliau memegang gelar Bachelor Science of Computer Science and Engineering. Randika telah mempublikasikan dan mempresentasikan beberapa makalah pada beberapa konferensi internasional seperti IEEE dan IJCDS. It is my pleasure to introduce our next guest speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next guest speaker, Mr. Randika Navagamur.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just jump in for a quick session here before Randika commences his session. So I'm Sital Gunawardana from the account management team here at WSO2. So I would like to give you a quick snapshot about what WSO2 means and what we stand for here. So moving forward. So as a company right now, we've got about 600 plus workforce in which 50% is the engineering force, along with, so they basically represent our the main workforce here, and also is considered as the main engine of WSO2, right? So when it comes to the customers, we've got about 500 plus customers from multiple verticals, and these are like global level customers, and who are also listed under Fortune 100, customers as well. It could be like healthcare to government to transportation to all of these verticals. We've already marked our middleware solutioning with those customers. And open source is one of our main value additions that we always push forward. This actually represents and also identifies us to be more flexible, and also proves the fact that we do not have vendor locking, even if you engage with us at a commercial level. And when it comes to the inception of WSO2, we were founded in 2005, and then we were mainly backed by Cisco and Toba Capital, venture capitalists. But right now, we are happy to announce that we are no more backed by any venture capitalists. So we always operate on positive cash flows, and we have generated that level of stability as of this point. When it comes to the presence, of course, we've got multiple physical locations located in Colombo, New York, London, Mountain View, Sao Paulo, Sydney, likewise. So we would classify us as an entity that is present on a global sense, and we operate globally, though we are headquartered in the US. And growth-wise, we are already putting in double-digit growth, and it's still growing even under the pandemic. So because we see lots of inquiries, lots of digital transformation needs that is coming from multiple verticals. So we are being sought out by many customers, many prospects that is coming from different countries as of this point. So this is in a nutshell what WSO2 is all about. So I'll basically let my colleague Randika to take it forward from this point onwards to discuss in specific to the topic at hand today.
Right. Thank you, Sitalka, and thank you, Sitra. I'm Randika Navagamur, and I'm a senior solutions engineer for the solutions architecture team of WSO2. So during this presentation, basically this session, we'll be covering about the digital transformation through API management and integration. So when it comes to today's session, what I'm going to talk about is, first of all, we'll be briefly discussing about what is digital transformation and how it can help your organization to grow. and also how APIs play a key role in digital transformation. So then we'll be talking about API management, mainly covering WSO2 API management solution. Then we'll be having a small session. It's kind of a demo session. It's an hands-on session to demonstrate a simple use case. Finally, we'll be having a very small Q&A session. And also, guys, I mean, during this session, if you have any kind of queries, or if you need any kind of, if you need me to clarify anything further, please raise your hand. Then we can allow you. We can open your mic, or else you can send your questions over chat. So we'll be answering you. And also feel free to answer any questions on your Bahasa language as well. So first of all, what is digital transformation? So basically, digital experience is the interaction between the user and the organization purely because of digital technologies. So, so when you convert your organization and when you want to digital transform your organization, what that means is the communication between and all the operations between the end user and the organization should happen using digital media. But it doesn't mean that it's just about being paperless. So what paperless means is basically exchanging and archiving information digitally rather than through letters and pages. But it's not just about being paperless. Why I'm saying that is if you have, let's say, a small organization which does all these things manually using papers and all this stuff, if you just computerize these things and if you store all the information in your hard disk, that doesn't mean that you have properly transformed your business. So before moving into the actual API management stuff, let me briefly explain how the organizations have been changed during the past years. So if we look at 1900s, we call that the age of manufacturing. So why we call that is the mass manufacturing makes industries more powerful. So in this diagram, so both these diagrams have been extracted from Forrester Research. So if you look at the left-hand side diagram, all the leading organizations, I mean successful companies are listed there. So from 1900s to 1960s, it's called the age of manufacturing. So then after that, there was this age of distribution. That means after building, after developing, after manufacturing all these things, there should be a proper way to distribute, because globally you should have a proper mechanism to distribute, and the transportation is the major fact. So then came the age of information. So that means it doesn't matter whether you have the proper stuff, and it doesn't matter whether you properly distribute all these things. You'll need to have the information. So those were the era where the connected PCs and supply chains came into the picture. And finally, nowadays, so after 2010, what the most important thing is the customer. So why we are saying that is, so it doesn't matter whether you have all the products with you, and it doesn't matter whether you have the proper distribution channels, and it doesn't matter whether you have all the required information. If you don't have the customer base, you won't be able to sell these stuff. So that is why the customer is the most important factor when it comes to organizations. And when it comes to age of consumer, you'll need to consider several factors. So first of all, you need to transform the customer experience. So the better the customer experience, the more number of customers will be coming into your businesses. And also you need to embrace the mobile mind shift. So the mobile mind shift is you need to have the mindset whether you have this expectation, that is that all the things that you want can be achieved. So that, I mean, it can be achieved during the proper timeline. So that that mindset should be there when it comes to the age of consumer. And also you need to become a digital disruptor. So what a digital disruptor is, so we can say a digital disruptor is the entity who's going to change who's going to change the expectations and behavior in the culture, market, industry, technology, or process that is caused by purely based on digital capabilities, channels, and assets. And finally, another aspect that we need to consider is, so after doing all these things, there will be business insights. I mean, there will be big data. So you should be able to take decisions based on this information, based on this big data that you have. So that is how you will be successful during this era. Now, this is a very simple example that I've added here to showcase the connected experience. So this is a website. It's called the omio.com. So if you go to this website, it's a website that can be used to book trains in Europe. So when you are traveling to Europe, you should be able to book all the trains by simply going through this website. But please note that under the search items, you can see that the booking.com has been integrated with this website. So how this integration has been done was somehow booking.com has exposed all the related services to external parties, and using those external services, this Omio has been integrated booking.com on their website. So when I'm browsing related trains on this website, and if I want to book a hotel, now I don't need to separately log into booking.com because this connected experience is there. So you just need to tick this search button, and you should be able to search booking.com as well. So this is another very popular example when it comes to the connected experience. So basically here, what left hand side is the Google Maps, and the right hand side is the Uber. So basically, these two services are complementing each other. So nowadays, when you go to Google Maps, and when you trying to find a location, and when you try to get the directions, rather than going into the Uber application, you should be able to get all the related information on Google Maps itself. And also, when it comes to Uber, the map Uber uses is Google Maps. So basically, these two services are complementing each other. So rather than reinventing the wheel, these two services are complementing each other. So this is why the APIs are a major role when it comes to the growth of a company. So when it comes to a digital platform, there are several things that we need to consider. So as we have discussed earlier, the most important factor are the people, because at the end of the day, those will be your consumers. But then again, right hand side, you can see services and data. So these services and data are your backend services. For an example, let's say you are a bank. Then your backend, your core banking system, your databases, and all these things will be your backend services and data. And the actual consumers will be the people. Now, the manual process is that typically, I mean, if we look at 10-15 years ago, people usually go to the banks and then do all these things. And in the bank, there will be these people, these employees, they'll be doing all these things manually. But nowadays we see there are mobile apps, there are web applications, there are various ways to interact with the end customers. So now what we usually do is, let's say if I want to make a transfer, I usually log into my mobile application or my web application, and then I do the transfer. And this mobile application and the backend services are integrated through the middleware. So this middleware is the API and integration. So this is why API does a major role. So when it comes to these open technologies for agile digital business, first of all, this is this component called the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is a system or interrelated computing devices. It can be mechanical or digital machines, objects, or anything. Basically, it will be communicating with some computer systems. And also, in addition to that, there is this smart analytics. So as we have discussed earlier also, we need to have proper analytics mechanism. So based on the real-time statistics, we can make proper decisions. Now, apart from these two items, this is the integration platform. So basically, there should be a proper identity and access management solution, because all the users will be handled through this proper identity and access management platform. And also, in addition to that, there should be a proper integration layer. So this integration layer will be the middleware when it comes to integrating your several systems and do all these orchestration things. Now, so all these 4 components that we have talked about just now are basically at the backend layer. And when it comes to exposing these services to, the external parties, the API management is the key component, because when you have like several systems, several services, and all these things, you have to expose these to outside world in a secure, in a more managed way. So that is where the API management comes into the picture. So when it comes to WSO2, we'll be providing an integration platform which has all these 3 components. So this is another aspect that we need to talk about when it comes to a digital transformation. So nowadays we call this the API first approach. So if you look at the left-hand side diagram, this is how typically we used to develop applications. So we had like a separate backend team and a front-end team. And first of all, the backend team will implement the services. And then first of all, the my backend team will develop their backend services. Then these services will be exposed as APIs. Now, as a third step, the front-end team will be using these APIs and build their client-side applications. Now, if you look at the whole process, it's kind of a serial way, because the front-end team can't start their work unless the back-end team completes the implementation of the APIs. So with the API first approach, this right-hand side diagram, first of all, even before developing the backend services, with a proper API management solution, you can develop the mock APIs, right? So after developing the mock APIs, all the API definitions will be there. So when you properly expose these mock APIs to the front-end team, they know, they can read the API documentation and all these things, so they can start working on the client-side application. And at the same time, the backend team also can build their backend service. So you can see that this is kind of a parallel approach. So first of all, you define the APIs properly, then both the client-side application developers, the front-end application developers, and the backend application developers can develop their applications parallelly. So this is called the API first approach. This is very popular nowadays. So here, so I've included this slide. So just to highlight that, when it comes to APIs, nowadays APIs are found in every layer. So it doesn't matter it's the UI layer, or it doesn't matter it's the business layer, the application layer, data layer, or the infra layer. In all layers you can find APIs. So now, so we have talked about what is digital transformation and why we need digital transformation, and why we need APIs. Now, so when it comes to APIs, you can't just expose some services and call that an API. So in the modern world, when it comes to an API, there should be several characteristics. So these are the things that you should identify, and when you are developing an API, so all these things should be there. So nowadays the APIs are RESTful. So the APIs are very lightweight, and they'll be implemented according to the REST style. And also when it comes to APIs, the APIs should be well documented. So if your APIs are not well documented, then the client-side application developers can't utilize those APIs properly. So, and if you have properly documented APIs, that means your methods, operations, responses, error codes, and all these things should be properly documented. So when you have properly documented APIs, that will increase your productivity significantly. And also the APIs should be manageable. So that means there should be a proper way to manage life cycles and the versions. So that means, let's say you'll be having an API call, let's say ABC. So after some time, you'll be deprecating this API and you'll be releasing another API. So now, when a user comes to your services and when a user wants to utilize these APIs, there should be a proper way to version that. So otherwise, the end user will be confused and he won't be able to identify which API that he should be using. And also the APIs should be discoverable. So that means there should be a proper portal or another mechanism where all the APIs are listed there, and the user should be able to search through these APIs. And also there should be a proper way to test these APIs. I mean, before publishing these APIs, there should be a proper way to test these APIs. And also the API should be measurable. So that means when it comes to number of hits per second and all these things, there should be a proper way to monitor how many hits and how many requests are there per second likewise. And finally, the most important thing, the APIs should be secure. So when you are exposing services from your backend services, most of the time you won't be considering security, because if you have a proper API management layer, the security will be handled there. So you don't have to consider security. So these are the things, I mean, when you're publishing APIs to WSO2 API Manager, it doesn't matter what kind of a service you have. All these features, all these characteristics can be enabled through WSO2 API Manager. WSO2 API Manager, I mean, if you have any concerns or any queries, please raise them on the chat. So we should be able to answer them. Now, so when it comes to WSO2 API management, so we have talked about the importance of having a proper API management layer. So what WSO2 provides is that exactly this. So we have this product called WSO2 API Manager. So when you have some backend services and all these things, and when you want to have a proper API management layer, you can place WSO2 API Manager in front of that, and you can expose your services as managed APIs without worrying security or throttling or any other API management features. So WSO2 API Manager is currently at the API version 3.3, and the product has been there for the past 8 years, and we have done 20 stable releases. And this WSO2 API Manager has been currently deployed on several large-scale enterprises, and a few of them are StubHub, Verizon, Motorola, and BIU, and we have a lot of them. And if you want to look at our case studies, you can go to WSO2 website and you can browse through case studies, and you can look at different industry verticals. And the same, I mean, when it comes to API management offerings, we have this thing called API Cloud. So the same WSO2 API management code has been deployed there with 4 nines uptime. The product is 100% open source, and we are doing 1 major release and 3 minor releases per year. And if you are looking at some kind of an automated deployment, so that option is there with WSO2 API Manager by configuring Puppet. And when it comes to deployment options, WSO2 API Manager can be deployed on standard VMs as well as containerized environments as well. And these are the things that we provide with WSO2 API Manager. So when it comes to WSO2 API Manager, so as I mentioned earlier, it's 100% open source. And when you download WSO2 API Manager, you will be getting a single downloadable package. So that means you just download it, start it, and use it as it is. You don't have to do anything else. And it has a high performance gateway. So this gateway is the backbone of WSO2 API Manager. And also this API management solution is available as a cloud offering as well. And most importantly, so this is a key factor. So based on your requirement, based on your use cases, we can decide the deployment choices, and we'll be having several deployment options. Now, this is the high-level architecture of WSO2 API Manager. So I won't be discussing in detail about each of these components, but if you look at these orange colored components, so these are the components of WSO2 API Manager. But when you download WSO2 API Manager from our website, you won't be noticing these components because so we have received a question. So the question is, if we have 3 different backend application environments, development, SIT, and production, how actually we must manage the API for each environment? Must we also implement environment for API and server, or one API management server that manage one API for 3 environment? Right. So to answer that question, so that question that they want to understand is, when you have multiple environments, how we want to achieve that one. So basically, the easiest approach is, for each environment you should have separate environments. So why we are saying that is, when it comes to WSO2 subscription, in addition to the production environment, we'll be providing 3 non-production environments free of charge. So for an example, you can have dev environment, SIT environment, and the production environment. And you'll be doing all the deployments on the all the changes and all these things on the development environment. And ideally, you can configure a proper CI/CD pipeline, and using the CI/CD pipeline, the deployment can be automated. So anyway, I have already prepared another slide regarding the CI/CD pipeline. So I'll be discussing these things during that slide as well. But if you want to know more, please raise another question. We'll be happy to answer. Now, back to this slide. So in addition to these main components, we'll be having first-class support for Istio and Kubernetes as well. Now, so the product is componentized, and when it comes to the components, WSO2 API Manager has these components: the publisher, the developer portal, the gateway, key manager, analytics, and the traffic manager. So the publisher is the component where the back office application developers will be logging in and publishing APIs. And the developer portal is the actual API marketplace. So your client-side application developers will be logging into the developer portal, and they can browse through the available APIs, and they can utilize those APIs. And the gateway is the backbone of the API Manager, because actual API traffic will be coming into the gateway component. So all these policies and all these security policies and the throttling policies are enforced at the gateway layer. So this key manager is the API key management component. So that will be acting as the authorization and the authentication server for the API Manager. And we have API Manager Analytics. So all the real-time analytics will be monitored using API Manager Analytics, and all the statistics can be monitored through our dashboard as well. And in addition to that, we have another component called the Traffic Manager. So this Traffic Manager is the component that will be used to enforce rate limiting policies. So when it comes to creating an API, so this publisher component is the component that we'll be using for creating API. So when you start the API Manager, as I mentioned earlier also, you don't have to worry about these multiple components. You will be getting the URL for the publisher portal, and you just log in there. And there, when you create an API, you can design a new REST API, or if you have a Swagger definition. So this Swagger is the open API specification. So if you have a proper Swagger definition, you can just you can point API Manager to your existing Swagger definition and publish an API. And also, if you have a SOAP API, then you can publish your SOAP API as well. And in addition to that, if you have a SOAP API and you want to convert it to a REST API, and that is also possible. And with API Manager 3 series, we have GraphQL out-of-the-box support as well. And also, we have support for WebSocket APIs as well. And another, so this is, so after publishing an API, so the publishing process will be, it's kind of a wizard. So basically, you can do all these things in this dashboard. So when you start the API Manager product, and when you log into the publisher portal, and when you publish an API, this is what you see. And we'll be going through this again during the demonstration. So this is another one of the major aspects when it comes to API management. So this comes with the API first approach. And if you just want to design the API without having a proper backend, you can you can either point your existing backends, production and the sandbox endpoints, or else you can implement a prototype implementation. So when it comes to this prototype implementation, you simply create a backend server using backend mock server using JavaScript. So when the request comes in, this script will be executed. And when it comes to the developer portals, I mean, once the publishing part is done, you will be logging into the developer portal. So publisher portal will have a separate URL, and the developer portal will have another URL. And when you log into the developer portal, all the published APIs will be listed there. And you can see that you can search these APIs and you can select these APIs likewise. And you can see that there's a small tag here saying created, published, created. So this is the lifecycle management. So by default, we have like 6 API lifecycles, and you can add custom lifecycles as well. And only this PizzaShack API is the only published API, and the other APIs are in the created state. Now, this is another important aspect when it comes to the developer portal. When you have APIs and when you want to utilize these APIs, you will have to create an application. So in this case, an application is, for an example, let's say you have these APIs, and you are, at the end of the day, you will be creating a mobile application and a web application. So in WSO2 API Manager developer portal, you have to create these 2 applications. So one is the mobile application, and the other one is the web application. And for each application, you can subscribe multiple APIs. And for each per application, you can generate access tokens. So these access tokens can be either OAuth2 tokens or else JWT tokens, JSON Web Tokens. It's up to you. And based on your choice, you will be generating access tokens. And using those access tokens, this particular application should be able to access the particular API. And also, please note that even though we have this UI available, all these things can be automated. I mean, all these things can be integrated with your client application through the available product APIs, because we have this API called the token API. So using the token API, you can integrate with your client-side application. So you don't have to, I mean, the end user won't have to log into this UI portal in order to generate the access tokens. So now the demo. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is the use case is like this. So I'm targeting the travel industry. So this use case is to demonstrate how you can do the digital transformation initiative in the travel industry. So this is the business objective. So there's this company, there's this organization called Speedy Getaways. So the Speedy Getaways has a fleet of buses which runs on a schedule, and now wants to provide a personalized user experience to its customers through digital means to enhance user satisfaction. So if you simplify this business objective, there's this organization called Speedy Getaways, and then they have a set of buses. And these buses run on a schedule. And if I want to schedule a bus, and if I want to make a booking, the process was I had to call their customer service, and I have to inform them, okay, I'll need to make this booking, and then and when I onboard the bus, I need to make the payment. So this is kind of a complex process, because if I want to cancel the booking, then again I'll have to call the customer service, and if I want to do the booking, do the payment, I'll have to do the payment at the bus station. So this travel company wanted to get rid of this manual process, and which currently involve customer calling the call center operator, which consumes considerable amount of time. So the technical requirements that this the organization want to achieve is, they want to create a mobile application to automate the entire process of booking a bus. So at the end of the day, there will be a mobile application. So when I want to check the bus schedule, I should be able to get all this information on my mobile application. And when I book a bus, I should be able to do the payment. So I don't have to wait until I go to the bus station. At the same time, when I do the booking using my mobile application, I can do the online payment. And whenever I want, I should be able to change the booking. So these are the simple technical requirements, but when it comes to a proper organization, there can be multiple use cases and multiple technical requirements. So I have just extracted these 3 simple use cases just to explain the demonstration. So let's try this out. So now, this is my backend service. So this is a simple Spring Boot application. It's called the Speedy Getaways, and these backend services have several backend services. So I'm going to invoke these backend services using Postman. So if I call this get all schedules, this my backend service, you can just monitor that I am not sending any authentication headers or anything. If I call this service, I'll be getting all the available schedules, right? So these are the schedules. Similarly, if I want to get a schedule by trip ID, I have a service. Likewise, I have several services. Like if I want to get the driver by ID, and if I want to make a booking, then I have to send this post request. And if I want to delete a booking, there's this delete request. Likewise, I have several services available. Now, I want to expose these services through WSO2 API Manager. So here, my API management server is up and running. So this is my API management server. It's running on my local machine. And here you can see I'm getting all the related required URLs here. So this is the API publisher default URL. So it's this one. And similarly, I'll be getting another URL for the developer portal. And on another terminal, I have my API Manager Analytics up and running. So this analytics server is it's already started. And on another terminal, I have my analytics service dashboard up and running. So you can see that then this is a URL that I want to go if I want to monitor the statistics, right? So during this process, if you need me to clarify anything, please raise your hand or raise any questions or stop me. So I should be able to clarify all the concerns you have. Now, if I want to publish this, I'll go to this URL. So when I go to this URL, this is where I go. So I'm already logged in. So that is why I wasn't asked to provide my username and password. So when you go to WSO2 API Manager, this is what you see. So if you just want to try out the API Manager, just download WSO2 API Manager, and you don't need to have a proper backend service like my one in order to test this out, because you can see that you can deploy a sample. You just click this and the sample will be deployed, and the required backend services will also deploy. So you can try this out. And when you are trying this API Manager out, when you have any kind of issues or concerns, please reach out to me, and I should be able to clarify those. Now, I'm going to create a new API. So at the moment, I'll be having a REST API, some service, and I'll be creating a REST API. Now, when I want to create an API, first of all, I need to provide the name. So I'm going to provide the name as Schedules API. And this is the context. So this context and the version are very important when it comes to APIs. So for this context, I'm going to provide schedules, and I'm going to provide the version as version 1. Now I need to provide the endpoint. So if you don't have a proper endpoint, and if you just want to create a mock API, you can ignore this providing endpoint part here, and you can provide the endpoint later. But since I have my endpoint with me right now, I'm going to provide it as the endpoint. This is just an HTTP endpoint. You can see that there's no security, no SSL certificates are there. As a business plans, I'm just going to put unlimited, but forget about that for now, because I'll be explaining that later. And I'm going to create the API. Right. So the API is successfully created, and I'll be seeing all these things. Now, when I go to these resources, I'll have to do some minor changes because I don't have a patch resource. So I'm going to delete that. And when it comes to post, so this post is there when you want to create a new schedule, right? So if you look at this method, if you want to add a new schedule, I need to pass a body, and this body is a JSON object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this, and I'm going to pass a parameter, and this parameter is the body. And the content type will be application JSON, because I'll be sending a JSON object. The data type can be object, and this is a required parameter. And similarly, the usual REST convention is you will be using post to add new entries, and you will be using put resources to update the existing entries. So when it comes to updates also, you have to pass the body. That is also an application JSON. The data type is object. It is also required. And also please note that here all the, when it comes to the resource, it's /star. That means whatever the things that are coming after this slash, after the context, will be sent into the backend service. But if you want to pass, if you want to get query params and all these things, then you can do that as well. So I'm going to save it here. Right, so I'll have to log in again. The session expired, that is fine. Need to check whether the save changes are there. No, they are not saved because the reason is my session has been expired. So for the moment, I'm not going to add the put one. I'll just add the post one. So here you can see that when you go to the overview, you will be seeing all the overall, the high level picture of the API. And you can go to the design overview to change the designs, and you can make this available on for selected set of users likewise. And when it comes to runtime configurations, you can configure transport level security, whether you want to have HTTP, HTTPS, or whether you want to have mutual SSL. And also you can have application level security, whether it's OAuth2, basic O, API key. Likewise, there are several things that you can try out, but I'm not going to go through all these things again. One of the main important things is this message mediation. So this message mediation is there when the request comes in. Before passing into the backend, if you want to do some kind of things to the incoming payload, these mediations can be used. So if you go through these common policies, this JSON to XML is there. So using this JSON to XML mediation, the JSON payload will be converted into an XML payload. So likewise, if you can write custom policies and upload it here, so it's just, you just need to write the Apache Synapse configuration file. So it's a very simple XML file, and you can upload it here. But for the moment, I'm not going to use any of these. Now, the second step, right? Now we have published the API. Now the travel company wants to enhance its reach by encouraging partner websites to advertise the company and make bookings in a secure manner. Now, the technical requirement is expose only selected APIs to external parties and expose a dedicated API to partners using already exposed APIs. So allow travelers to make bookings from third-party sites using their credentials of the travel company. And allow travelers to make bookings using their social network login. And the main concern is how do you authenticate and authorize. So the requirement, if we simplify these requirements, the first thing is these APIs should be able to should be exposed to the travel company's mobile application, and the third-party partner website should be able to integrate these services, right? So these are the two major requirements. Now, when it comes to access delegation, there are several aspects. So the major, as we have talked earlier, there are these actual API consumers and there are these client applications. So when it comes to these client applications, there are 4 types. So the client application can be unsecure and untrusted, right? And the client application can be secure and untrusted. And also the application can be secure and trusted. And also there can be system-to-system authentication. So with OAuth2, I mean, the current nowadays, the most popular one is JWT, and also with OAuth2, there are 4 grant types. So using these grant types, you can achieve these 4 common scenarios. So the 4 grant types are authorization code, implicit, resource owner password, and the client credentials. So if we go through these grant types, one by one, the authorization grant type is useful when the user doesn't trust the client. So that means if I don't trust the website that I'm going to book this, I'm going to use these APIs, then the authorization code grant type should be used, right? So if the resource owner, I mean, if I'm the one who's going to use this and the client is a website, then this is an idea. So for this, when it comes to this actual use case, if the third-party website is making a reservation to Speedy Getaways on behalf of a guest via the bookings API, then authorization code grant type is the actual grant type that you should consider. So in this scenario, the Speedy Gateways is the organization. So we'll be exposing the bookings API. So the bookings API will be integrated with third-party partner websites. So this partner website is not a trusted one, right? It's not a trusted client. So the authorization code grant type should be used. So how we use authorization code grant type is, so this is a very simple sequence diagram. So the client application will talk to the API gateway, and the API gateway will talk to the authorization server. So in this case, when you download WSO2 API Manager, the authorization server will be the key manager. But ideally, if you have your own authorization server, that can be integrated with WSO2 API gateway. So the authorization server will redirect a login page to the user. So the user enters username and password. Then the authorization server will offer the authorization code. So the client application now has the authorization code. So with the authorization, by exchanging the authorization code, client application can request the access token. So whenever user wants to revoke the access, they can revoke the access to the authorization code. So we have another grant type called implicit grant type. So this is very similar to the authorization code, but with this grant type, you don't require an authorization code exchange. So that means when you provide your username and password, the access token will be provided. So these type of things, this grant type is mainly used when you want to when the client is not capable of keeping the client's own credentials, such as JavaScript only applications. So if you want to integrate our services with a JavaScript based web application, then implicit is the ideal grant type that you should consider. So this is the implicit grant type. So basically, it's the initial flow is similar. So the authorization server will be, the user will be redirected to the authorization server's login page. And once the user credentials are provided, the authorization server will provide the access token. And in addition to these things, we have 2 more grant types, the resource owner password credentials grant type. So that means, so this grant type is suitable in cases where the resource owner has a trust relationship with the client. So if I trust the client, for an example, let's say the mobile application, I trust the mobile application. So in this kind of scenarios, basically the resource owner will provide the username and password to this client application, and client application will do the booking on behalf of the, will generate the access token on behalf of the user and do the booking. And the client credential is another grant type. So this is suitable for authentication scenarios that doesn't require consent from the end user. For an example, the partner site is checking the availability of the bookings. So when partner site is booking the availability, partner site is checking the availability of the availability from the bookings API, the user should not be logged in. So for those kind of scenarios, the client credentials can be used. So basically, a client, the client secret and the client ID will be used. So if we want to try this out now, now I have published this API. Now let's go to the developer portal. So let me browse to the developer portal. Sorry. Right. So, sorry. So this API is not listed here because the reason is, if you go to the lifecycle page, you can see that the current API is in the created state. So it is not published. So you can see these are the current states available in the lifecycle management page. So when I publish this API, you can see that it is changed to the published state. So from the published state, you can easily demote it to created or block or prototype. Likewise, or you can move it to the deprecated state. Likewise, you can change these states. So this is a major aspect when it comes to the API management. Now, when I refresh the developer portal, I see this API. Now, if I go to this API, I see what is the context and what are the gateway URLs, and all these things are available. So this is the gateway URL. I mean, if I want to invoke this API, this is the URL that I should invoke, and all the resources are also available. Now, in order to sign to this, in order to subscribe to this API, I need to sign in. So I don't need to provide my username and password again, because the reason is single sign-on is configured between these two portals. So now let me create an application. So the developer portal by default comes with the default application. But for now, let me create an application called web application, or let's say mobile app. So here, for the moment, I'm going to put the token quota as unlimited. So that means the token unlimited number of tokens can be unlimited API requests can be sent per a given token. And I'm going to have the token type as JWT for now. I have to create the API. Now I need to subscribe. So when I go to the subscriptions page, so this application doesn't have any subscription, so it's 0. I'm going to subscribe to API. So I have this API called Schedules API, and its version is 1. And I'm going to select the policy as unlimited. So this policy means, if you remember, when I was publishing the API, APIs, so here as the business plans, I put only unlimited. So that is why I only see the unlimited policy here. And I'm subscribing this. Okay, successfully done. To close it, and I'm going to go to the production keys. So when you are on the development phase, you can use the sandbox environment, and you can use sandbox keys. So here you can choose the grant type. So I'm not going to change any grant types here. I'm going to put all these things as default. But when it comes to the access token validity period, it's set to 3600. So that means after 1 hour, after 3600 seconds, the token will be expired. So I'm going to put it as -1. So the -1 means this token will not expire. So it's unlimited to generate the access token. Right. Now, so this is the access token generated. So you can see this is not an OAuth2 token. This is a JWT token. So that is why this is a bit lengthy. So I'm going to copy this access token and I'm going to close it. Now, when you want to try this out, you don't have to log into another separate. I mean, when I was trying out my web services, I was going through the Postman. I was doing it using Postman. But with WSO2 API Manager, you don't need to have a separate application, because API Manager comes with a testing tool. So I'm going to try it out, right? So here I need to provide my access token. So I'm going to environment as production and sandbox, and you can switch the application here, and I'm going to provide my access token. So this is my access token. So now if I want to get all the schedules, I just need to provide it, and I get all the responses here. Now, if I change this access token a bit, right? I change this access token a bit and send the request again, I'll be getting an error. So this error says invalid credentials. That is because now, say earlier we had some services which are not secured. Now we have a service which is properly secured using WSO2 API Manager, and now you need to provide your credentials in order to secure. So now I copied the previous access token, and if I send it again, I'll be getting the same response. Right? So this is how we secure APIs using WSO2 API Manager. Now, in addition to that, we have this concept called federated identity. So the federated identity is where the enabling users to log in from third-party identity providers such as Facebook or Google. So the use case is like this: a traveler wants to, the traveler doesn't want to use, doesn't want to create a username and password for this particular website or the travel company. They want to use their Facebook credentials. So if you want to do that, that is also pretty straightforward. So this Facebook can be integrated with WSO2 Identity Server and use and configure federated identity. So when the request comes into the API gateway will talk to the identity server, and it will be redirected to the third-party login. So that means you just enter your username and password for Facebook username and password on the Facebook login screen. And then again, the Facebook will redirect to the API gateway with the authorization code. So this is the authorization code grant type. So this is another aspect. Now we know that we have some backend services and we have the front-end application and we have the gateway. Now when the request comes in, let's say you need to send some user attributes to the backend service. Right? Let's say when the request comes in, you need to send users email address to the backend service, and you need to have a secure way. So basically, when it comes to passing attributes between API gateway and the backend services, you can configure JWT tokens. So the API gateway will generate the JWT token, and it will sign the JWT token using the certificates. So the backend service, backend service knows that this request came from API gateway and it is not tampered, right? So now the third step is the travel company, the Speedy Gateway's travel company wants to ensure that the external partner access to APIs are controlled based on the type of the partnership. So the technical requirement is like that. Let's say, so I'm the Speedy Gateway's company and I want to expose my services to third-party partners. And there can be several types of partners. There can be premium partners, there can be basic partners. And based on the type of the partnership, I should be able to enforce different throttling policies. That means for premium partners, for premium partners, they can request 1,000 requests per second. And when it comes to basic partners, they can only request 50 requests per second. Likewise, I need to enforce different throttling policies based on the type of the partnership. So how we are going to enforce this is, so if you go to this WSO2 API Manager demo, here you find the Carbon console. So here you need to engage with the when it comes to this Carbon console, you can browse through the user store. So at the moment we are not integrated, we have not integrated with any third-party user store. So we browse our user store with the Carbon console, and here all the available users are listed here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enforce these throttling policies for different partners using roles. So I'll be adding a new role. So let me add a new role. So I'm calling this role as premium partner. Premium partner. And when you are creating a role, you can add different permissions. So, but since this is a demonstration, I'll be adding all the permissions to this user, this role. Now I'm going to create that role. You can see that the created new premium partner role is there. And I'm going to add another role. So this role is called the basic partner. So for this partner also, I'm going to add all the permissions. So because the reason is, even though we are creating these roles, we are not limiting any kind of permissions. This is just to explain how you can enforce different throttling policies using roles. Now let me add two different users. So first of all, let me create a new user. So I'm calling this user as partner 1, and I'm going to add a password here. And for this user, I'm going to add all the roles instead of the basic partner. So this user will have all the roles, including the premium partner role, but without the basic partner. That part is done. Now I'm going to add another partner that is called the partner 2. And for this partner also, I'm going to add all the roles, but instead of the premium partner. So if you now we have, in addition to the admin user, we have two partners. So the partner 1, just keep this in mind. Partner 1 is having premium partner, but he doesn't have the basic partner role. But when it comes to the partner 2, he has all the roles, including the basic partner, but he doesn't have the premium partner roles. That means the partner 2 is a basic partner, and the partner 1 is a premium partner. Now we have this another UI portal that is called the admin portal. Now I'm going to go to the admin portal. I have to log into this admin portal. So once I log into the admin portal, you can create different throttling policies here. Now, if I go to the subscription policy, these are the subscription policies available, right? These are the application policies. So I'm going to add a new policy. So new policy is called the, let's say, premium partner policy. So you can add a description. So for this description also, I'm adding here this one. For premium partners, I'm allowing them to access, let's say, 1,000 requests per minute. So you can change the unit here. So I'm going to add 1,000 requests per minute, and you can control burst and all these things here. And when it comes to the role, instead of having internal everyone, I'm going to put the role I've created just now. So this partner 1, this one is premium partner. So in order to access, in order to access this particular policy, you need to be a premium partner. Now I'm going to save it. Right now we have another subscription throttling policy called premium partner policy. Now again I'm adding another policy called basic partner policy, and for the basic partner policy, I'm going to add basic partner role. So I'm going to run for the premium partner. I've allowed them to do 1,000 requests per minute, but for the basic partner, I'm going to have 250 requests per minute. And for the roles, I'm going to put basic partner. I'm going to save. Now you can see I have two different throttling policies: premium partner policy and the basic partner policy. Now, if I refresh this, you can see that the created two partner policies are here. So here the description is missing here because I forgot to add a description here, but you can see these two partners policies are here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to untick the unlimited policy and I'm going to put premium and basic, right? Now when I publish this API can be subscribed only using basic partner policy or the premium partner policy. I'm going to save it. Done. Now I'm going to go to the developer portal. Now please just keep in mind, now I'm in the admin user, but I have created two separate users for partner 1 and partner 2. I'm going to log out. So I can see this API available on the public store, and I'm going to log in using the partner 2. So I have created the new user and the username is partner 2, and I put a password as well. And when I log in here, I see this API. Now I go to this API. So at the moment, I'm not going to create any applications. I'm going to use the default application. Yes, so you can see that when you select the application, you only see the basic partner policy. You don't see any other policy because this particular user, this partner 2, only has permission to subscribe using the basic partner policy. So similarly, if you log out from partner 2, and if you sign in using partner 1, and if you try to subscribe, you will see only the premium partner policy because this partner is eligible for the premium partner policy. And once you subscribe, it will be successfully done. So whenever you reach this limit, the client-side application will be getting an error saying the throttling policy has been exceeded. Right? So I'm not going to generate 1,000 requests and do this. But when you have a free time, please try out our API manager and try out these different things. And whenever you have any kind of concerns or any kind of questions, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you out. Now, so when it comes to this rate limiting, why we need rate limiting is we need to enforce different SLAs on API access, and we need to have proper way to burst control. That means, I mean, if your backend system cannot handle a specific number of, if your backend system cannot handle this some number of requests, then that can be enforced as the gateway layer. And also you can monetize your APIs. That as the use case we have discussed earlier, you can allow different rate limiting policies for different types of users. So this is what I've explained just now. I mean, when you have a backend service, and if you want to prevent your backend service from having a burst, then that can be also done through rate limiting done at the API gateway level. Now, this is another thing that you want to do. The final use case. The travel company now wants to bring in partners, offer related services such as local tour operators, local theaters, and restaurants to provide services to its guests. So the technical requirement is like this. Let's say you have an API, and let's say it's a schedules API. With the schedules API, there are several things that you can do. For an example, you can make with a booking API. If you look at the bookings API, you can make a booking. You can make a booking, and you can change the booking. But based on the access level you have, some resources should be disabled. So this is what we are going to do right now. So the technical requirement is, for an example, let's say there are some partners where they should be able to only check the schedules, but they should not be able to make new schedules. So this can be done through scopes. So in WSO2 API Manager, we have this thing called auth to scopes. So using these scopes, you can enforce these things. For an example, you should implement a mechanism where only the get resource of the schedules API is available. So how we are going to do this is, you can create, let me log in using that. Here you can create scopes. So when it comes to the scopes, let me create a scope saying premium scope. So for the premium scope, I'm going to put the role. So as a role, I'm going to put the premium partner role. Create the scope. So now we have created the scope for this particular API, and the scope is bounded to the premium partner role. Now I'm going to go to this this one, and I'm going to change this post resource and put the operational scope as premium scope. So that means if you minimize this, and for delete also, I'm going to put a premium scope, and I'm going to delete this. I'm going to put premium scope for put as well. Now, if you closely look at these 4 resources available, these 3 resources, put, post, and delete, are bounded with the premium scope. Only the get is available publicly. Now, if you go to the developer portal and now I have to log in as the premium basic partner. Sorry, I'm going to log in as partner 2. Now, please remember that the partner 2 doesn't have the premium partner role. He only has the basic partner role. So I'm going to subscribe this API using the basic partner policy, and this partner only has the basic partner role. Now I'm going to generate the production keys. To copy this access token, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to paste this here. And if I try to execute this get resource, I'll be getting the proper response. Now, let me create a new schedule. So in order to create a schedule, I need to pass some kind of a body. And I'm going to get this body copied from, but that is fine. Just set an empty body because the body won't be executed, because even before that I'll be getting this error. The error says the access token does not allow you to access the required resource. So I didn't have to send any request the body here, because the body will be validated at the backend layer, but the request won't be going to the backend layer, because at the gateway layer it identifies that there is a scope validation and this resource has been only allowed to access by the premium partners, right? So this is how you do this kind of validation. And if you want to do any kind of complex access control, and that can be also done using this attribute-based access control using SACML policies. For an example, let's say the previous use case was based on the partner type, you need to limit some set of resources. But let's say you need to have a mechanism where the bookings API will be available only between 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So likewise, if you want to do this kind of complex access control, that can be also done through WSO identity server. But please note that in order to do that, you can't use WSO2 only WSO2 API manager. You'll have to integrate WSO2 identity server as well. Now, the final thing is now the travel company wants to look at the current operational insights. So they want to identify the top users of the booking API and give them some special offers. And also they need to identify the business patterns. So, and the API usages. And they need to drill down operational issues of APIs. And they need to detect anomalies. So all these things can be done with WSO2 and API Manager Analytics. So as you can see here, this is the high level architecture. When it comes to API Manager, API Gateway will publish all the statistics to the API Manager Analytics component, and the summarized information will be stored in a summarized table, summarized statistic, and using the dashboard, you can monitor all these statistics. And also in the meantime, real-time statistics will be published as alerts as well. So this is the statistical analytics using API Manager Analytics. These dashboards are available. So if we go to the analytics dashboard, you can get the dashboard URL from here. And if you go to the analytics dashboard, you can see that publisher dashboard, developer dashboards, all the things are here. You can see that the top API creators, all these things are here. See, you can see the admin created. So the top app creators are admin created 2 apps, partner 2 created 1 app, partner 1 created 1 app. Likewise, all these things are here. And API usage summary, API throttling summary, subscription summary, all these things are monitored here. All this information, API created over time, apps created over time, backend latencies, and if you want to have a geomap, falls, all these things are available at the API Manager Analytics component. And finally, So finally, DevOps team of the company wants the API management system to follow a standard CI/CD process as other systems. So the requirement is all artifacts need to be created in the development environment and moved to the higher environment. So this is the question that the earlier raised. So then the solution needs to implement a proper standard CI/CD tool. So this is the API development lifecycle. So basically, you should have some several separate environments: development, testing, and production. And since WSO2 is providing 3 non-production environments and the DR environment free of charge, you don't have to worry about this. So this platform can be can be implemented very easily, because this API Manager CTL tool is another tool we provide free of charge. So basically, the entire platform can be, entire system can be implemented. So API developers and the API publishers will be doing their changes on the development environment, and they'll be committing them to the version controlling system. And the DevOps team, basically these tools, it can be Travis, it can be Jenkins or anything. They'll be picking up the change from the version controlling system, and using the API Manager command line tool, those changes will be published into the higher environments accordingly. And also, please note that with the proper CI/CD pipeline, when you do the developments and when you commit these changes to the version controlling system, when you commit these changes to the version controlling system, API the Jenkins pipeline or the pipeline will extract all the changes accordingly and push to the testing environment through WSO2 API Manager CTL, and all the testing scripts will be run automatically. And whenever only if all the tests are passed, this will be moved into the higher environment, which is the production environment. And during the process, all the things can be monitored. So if you want to try this out, please go through our website or reach out to us, so we can help you out. And if we talk about the summary of this session, so we have talked about the digital transformation. So the digital transformation is all about creating a digital experience for your customers. And then we have talked about API is all the key for digital transformation and building a connected experience. So that means it doesn't matter what is the organization is, what is the domain is, APIs hold a key role. And then we have talked about the API first approach. That means the APIs always comes first. And then we have talked about the WSO2 API Manager. And then we have talked about the digital transformation in travel industry. So when it comes to this demonstration, we have talked about six steps: the API exposure for a mobile application, then securing APIs for external consumers, API throttling and rate limiting, and access control for APIs, business insights, and deployment automation. So with the limited time we had to quickly go through each of these topics. But if you need to try this out on your own, please reach out to us so we can share the demo artifacts with you. So you can try your own and get back to us if you have any kind of concerns or question. So so this is the end. So if you have any kind of concerns or questions, I can answer. And also feel free to ask anything in Bahasa as well. So the Swamedia team can do the translation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Randika, for your presentation about the WSO2 API Manager. Kita akan ke sesi selanjutnya, yaitu sesi Q&A. Peserta bisa mengajukan pertanyaan kepada dua pembicara kita, bisa ke Pak Ahmad Syahrudin atau Mr. Randika. Jika ingin bertanya, silakan di bawah tombol di situ ada fitur Q&A. Silahkan inputkan, tulis pertanyaannya. Kalau bisa mungkin untuk mempercepat waktu bisa menggunakan bahasa Inggris juga. Dipersilahkan untuk kepada para peserta. Oke, sudah ada satu. Can you show me on how to type in the payload when creating a new REST API with POST method? Terima kasih kepada Bapak Jun. Mr. Andika, can you answer it?
Yes, nice. So, so I'm not sure what you meant by how to type in. What is the actual requirement, whether you want to change the payload, is it the requirement? Because when it comes to publishing an API, what you just want to do is you just need to log into the API manager, the publisher portal, right? And when you go to the publisher portal, as I did earlier, you can create the REST API, and here you can provide any kind of backend service here, and you just need to publish the API, and you just need to put the business plan. And once you do this, you can go to the resources, and in the resources under post, this is the post method. So here you can do any kind of things like what kind of parameters that you expect from the post method likewise. And if you want to change the payload, then what you should do is you can go to the design runtime configurations, and you can go to the message mediation, and here you can select the custom mediation. So for an example, this is what if you select this custom policy, the JSON payload will be converted into an XML payload. So if you download this one, and if you open it here, so this is the mediation. So likewise, you can include any kind of custom mediation there. I'm not sure whether I have answered your question properly because I didn't understand what you meant by the type in the payload. And also, if you want to have a mock API created, then that is also possible. So what you can do is you can just create API without providing the endpoint. Then you can go to the endpoints tab, and here you can provide different endpoints. So here you can go to the prototype endpoint, and you can go to the prototype implementation and add here. Then so here you can provide the mock API script, right? So I hope I've understood you, but I've answered you. But please let me know if you need any more clarification. So we have another question. Can API manager find API by endpoint? So it's like this. So if you are asking about service discovery, that is possible with WSO2 micro integrator. So micro integrator is, I mean, if you go to this slide deck, so here we have the API gateway component. And in addition to the API gateway, we have another component called the micro gateway. So this micro gateway is very similar to standard API gateway, but it is specifically designed for container-friendly environments. So if you deploy this on the Kubernetes environment, you can implement service discovery. And yeah, so API manager should be able to find APIs by endpoint, yes. And also we have another option, that is when you go to the endpoints, we have dynamic endpoints available. So using the dynamic endpoints, the incoming request can specify this is the endpoint that we should. For an example, let's say we have a specific API, and there can be multiple backend services. So based on the incoming request, API manager has the capability to decide, okay, this should go this backend, or this should go to that backend likewise. So I hope I have answered your question, but please reach out to us if you need any more clarifications.
Ada lagi yang ingin bertanya? Kita masih ada waktu sekitar 10 menit lagi sebelum closing. Ada lagi kira-kira? Selain kepada Saudara Randika, kepada Mr. Andika bisa juga bertanya tentang overview dari tadi yang sudah dibahas sebelumnya. ke Bapak Ahmad Syahrudin. Atau mungkin sambil menunggu ada yang bertanya, saya akan coba bertanya, Mr. Andika, how many transaction maximum WSO2 API Manager able to handle? Randika, Mr. Randika.
Yes, Sitra.
How many transaction WSO2 API Manager able to handle? Can you answer it?
Yeah. So it's not a straightforward answer, Sitra, because the reason is our performance benchmarks are publicly available, and a single API Manager instance, 2 cores and 4 GB of RAM. It's a minimal configuration that should be there in a single API Manager instance. And a single API Manager instance with, let's say, less than 10 kilobytes of payload, the API Manager should be able to handle around 2,000 to 3,000 transactions per second. But actually, the number of transactions will be depending on several factors like the backend latencies, payload size, the number of concurrent connections. All these things will affect the number of transactions per second. So what we can do is we can share the performance benchmarks with you. And after and ideally, even before going to the production, you should do a proper performance benchmarking in order to identify how many transactions can be handled with the proper this particular deployment.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
So we have another question. So the question is, in the API development lifecycle slide, so the developer and the publisher main tools is no longer use dev portal in API Manager, but more to use CI/CD tools, right? Yes, you are correct. So it's like this. So after having this proper deployment, we'll be using the API Manager, publisher, and the developer portals in order to do the development phase, right? So when you do the development on your development environment, you will be using the publisher and the development tools. But once you publish these APIs, you can, rather than using the when it comes to CI/CD pipeline, the API publishing part will happen through the API management CTL tool, command line tool. So what happens is, when you do this development using the API Manager publisher portal, you can export this you can export the particular API. Then this exported API will be committed into the version controlling system. Then the CI/CD pipeline will pick the committed changes, and that will be mainly an API project. So we call that an API project. And then this API project will be pushed into the other environment through the API management CTL tool. So the most important thing is, when it comes to the developer portal, the developer portal should be used, because the reason is, even with the production environment, the production clients, production application developers should browse through the APIs on the API developer portal. So you are partially correct. So the API Manager publisher portal will be used to develop the APIs. Then the API will be exported and be committed into the version controlling system. Then the CI/CD pipeline will pick the changes from the GitHub repository and push to the higher environments through the API Manager CTL tool. But when it comes to the production environment, application developers will be able to go through the APIs through the API developer portal. Hope I have answered your question. So we have another question. Based on the benchmark result you mentioned, can you also share the specification of the hardware server to achieve that result, along with minimum and recommendation specification? Right. So yeah, so we can share that. So what we can do is, I can share that with you. So the Sitalka will share that over. So Andrew will share this information over email. So we have all the performance benchmarks and the required hardware specifications published on our website. So if I go through them quickly, you need to have at least 4 GB of RAM per instance and 2 cores of CPU. So that is the minimum recommendation. And also when it comes to operating systems, we do support Microsoft, Microsoft Windows, Red Hat, and all these things. And all these recommendations and tested systems are available. So when it comes to databases, we do support MySQL, MS SQL, and all these things are available. So Andre will share the documentation links with you. And we have another question, that is, can we set the rules for each operation in one API service? Or we can only set rules for API that affects whole operation of the API? Yes, you can do that. So basically, when it comes to API manager, and if you go to an API, if you go to the resources, so here when it comes to rate limiting, you can specify at the API level. So the rate limiting will be applied to the entire resources, or else you can pick it. You can set it to operational level. So when it set to the operational level, you should be able to apply rate limiting policies per API. But if you set it to API level, then you can't set it at the resource level. Yes, so both the options are available with API Manager, WSO2 API Manager.
Masih ada waktu sekitar 5 menit lagi. Apalagi akan ada yang bertanya lagi? Masih ada? Kalau misalkan sudah tidak ada yang bertanya, mungkin saya akan menutup acara virtual workshop WSO2 ini. Bapak dan Wishwa.
Yes, Indra. If we don't have any questions, I think we can conclude the session.
Oke. Bapak dan Ibu peserta, alhamdulillah kita sudah mendapatkan materi-materi luar biasa dari kedua narasumber, mulai dari overview mengenai open source, pemaparan WSO2 API Manager, case-case dan solusi implementasinya, sampai sesi tanya-jawab yang sudah berlangsung insya Allah dengan baik. Mudah-mudahan materi yang disampaikan oleh para expert pada hari ini bermanfaat, dan semoga Bapak dan Ibu sekalian tertarik untuk mengimplementasikan proses bisnis atau efektivitas kinerja Bapak Ibu menggunakan WSO2, dan diharapkan juga Bapak dan Ibu bisa bergabung di komunitas Indonesia WSO2 Meetup Group yang bisa Anda lihat di website Meetup. Sebagai referensi untuk mengenal lebih dekat WSO2 dan memperoleh how to, tips and trick, dan hal-hal teknis lain mengenai produk stack WSO2, Anda bisa mengunjungi www.belajarwso2.com. Untuk langkah selanjutnya, kami akan memberikan slide presentasi workshop ini dan membagikan link free training program serta promo code untuk free training WSO2. Ini akan kami share melalui email para peserta workshop ini. Bagi peserta yang sudah mengajukan pertanyaan di sesi tanya-jawab sebelumnya, tim kami akan mentransfer voucher OVO atau GoPay sesuai data yang sudah diinput di form registrasi sebelumnya. Bagi peserta yang sudah bertanya tapi belum sempat memasukkan nomor OVO atau GoPay-nya di form registrasi, bisa kirimkan nomor OVO atau GoPay-nya ke email, nanti ke email juwita@swamedia.co.id. Lebih jelasnya nanti akan dilihat di chat, di Zoom webinar chatnya. Terima kasih. Sebentar, tadi yang nanya itu ada 6, yaitu Neni, Jun, Anindita, Nias, Rifki, Juli, dan Alan. Dimohon dari 6 penanya bisa lebih lanjut untuk mengirimkan nomor OVO atau GoPay-nya ke alamat email yang sudah dikirimkan di chat. Terima kasih kepada para narasumber dan peserta yang sudah berkenan untuk berpartisipasi dan menyimak pemaparan dari narasumber. Saya Citra Sari, terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oke, Wiswa.
Okay, thank you everyone. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Wiswa.